All right, leaders and change makers, welcome back to another episode of Amputate to Elevate Success, the podcast for those navigating high stakes transitions and aiming to rise higher. I'm your host, John Register, and you know what we have to do? We have to uncover the moments when life challenges us, whether it's adversity, a tough decision, or a forced pivot. And we ask, do we stay the same or do we amputate what no longer serves us so we can elevate to our next level of success? Today's guest lives that philosophy to the fullest. She's a force in diplomacy, business, leadership, and education. Someone who's shaped global programs, advised top leaders, and still finds time to uplift communities. So here's the big question. What did she have to let go of in order to rise? And that's what we're diving into today. But before we do, please hit that subscribe button, smash that thumbs up button, and share this episode with a colleague, friend, or leader who needs a spark to elevate their own success journey. This show is for bold leaders ready to transform setbacks into their setups for their next breakthroughs. So let's do this. This is Amputate to Elevate Success podcast. It starts right here, right now. Today's guest, Marie Royce, is a powerhouse in global leadership. She is the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Educational and Cultural Affairs, where she oversaw a $670 million budget, led international exchange programs, and earned unanimous Senate confirmation, a rare feat in today's political climate. In the private sector, Marie's track record spans senior roles at Procter & Gamble, Marriott International, and Lucent Technology, companies where leadership and innovation matter. We even had the chance to engage with Lucent not too long ago, and the impact of her work still resonates. In academia, she shaped minds as a professor and contributed her expertise to institutions like USC's Center for Public Diplomacy. And today, she leads as CEO of Marie Royce LLC, sits on more than 20 corporate and nonprofit boards, and recently received the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Legacy Award for Leadership in Global Education. Marie is a master strategist, a connector of cultures, and a trailblazer in transformation. Marie and I first connected during her State Department tenure, where I had the honor of speaking with Secretary Pompeo thanks to her leadership and leading right at the head of the pandemic. So buckle up. This conversation is full of insight, inspiration, and actionable wisdom. Let's welcome to the show, Marie Royce. Marie Royce, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. You also were very gracious, and you did my town hall meeting during COVID at the U.S. Department of State, which I really appreciated. So thank you for that, besides doing the fireside chat. And of course, one of the other great things I got to do for those watching today, as you will recall about COVID, there was what we call level 4, which is do not travel. When we went to level 3, I asked my immediate boss, can I travel? And he said, if it's critical. So one of the things I did was I decided it was critical to go to Kazakhstan. And I went out to Kazakhstan and I got to see the Paralympic Training Center, John, as you know, where you have your proteges that actually help create that for Paralympic athletes. And I got to go out and see it. I was out in Almaty and Nur Sultan. And I just wanted to say I did that in, let me think, was that November of 2020? Yeah, November of 2020. So anyway, I got to really see some really great work that you did on the mentoring level. And so I just want to applaud you for that.
I appreciate that. I may come back to that just to show how working together on both sides of the aisle really makes programs globally, internationally move forward. So these programs moved from Secretary Rice to Secretary Clinton, and it kept on moving so that we could actually do programs like this. So I'm a huge fan of state. So and I serve at the capacity of the Marie Royces of the world as you see fit. One of the things that we always start this show with is is a question that gets people thinking, from a leadership standpoint. People find their success in all different types of ways. But the question we ask is, what did you have to amputate in order to elevate for your success?
Well, when you say amputate, I just want to be clear. What do I have to get rid of to be successful?
Let go, get rid of, cut out of your life. It may have hurt. You may have phantom pains to it, but that had to go in order for me to be more successful.
Well, I would just say I've had to do that many times in my life. And I continue to do it. So consequently, I've worked in various fields, various industries, as you noted, and in various functions. So what that means is that I couldn't just be an expert in one area in the same industry in my entire life, or even living in the same geography. I've had to start over again with new companies, new geographic locations, new roles. And oftentimes you start in these new jobs where people have worked in these organizations for years, whether it's a corporation. You mentioned Procter & Gamble. When I worked for them, I had a global job at the end of my career, and the company has 120,000 employees. So you imagine doing this global role, and you're trying to work and getting people to voluntarily help support your initiative, which is really, and here you are, the kind of the outsider. And I came from California in sales management in the healthcare division. And then I moved into research and development as a person that knew, really, I guess you could say, sales. But all the people I worked with were engineers and scientists in that job. So what I had to do, and I think it's really important here, is that I use the same skills for all these different jobs. But the highest person at the company in research and development, he commented on this paper we had to do. We had to do once a month what we called the monthly letter, the one-page memo. And he basically wrote on it, make sure it's their system. And what was I working on? I was putting together the first global measurement system for the Procter & Gamble company to measure in the areas of the environment. And I had to bring the whole company together from a 9-person team, and I was the junior person. So the reason I mentioned that is they also told me that I was the 4th person brought into the job, and the other 3 people were not successful. And I was up on the top floor of the top executives, and one of the executives, when I was introduced, laughed at me. And he said to me, "Good luck." And I said, with my hand outstretched, "I'll show you." And what happened was I basically was able to do it. It took 2 years. And that gentleman who was in charge of all our plant emissions reductions globally became a reference. I asked him to be one of my references, and he said he was happy to do it because I did show him. So that's just an example. But why does that matter? Because I didn't know anybody at the headquarters. I was very lonely. I was feeling sorry for myself, and I thought, what could I do? And I remember I had some interesting things that happened. They had different seminars that you could go to. And one of the women that gave a seminar, she also was the editor of our paper, our magazine. And I invited her over to my office. And then I decided, again, why feel bad? You can do something. So I created a group called More Than Lunch. And More Than Lunch was this group where I knew 5 people, and everybody had to bring somebody, and that we would meet a minimum of once a month. And I asked Mary Ann, the librarian at Procter & Gamble headquarters. I met Jane, who was the editor of our magazine. All these different women, I said, will you be part of my group? And they invited people. And so then what happened was I created a network, and I even went back to Cincinnati, and I'm a native Californian, but this is where the job was for the headquarters, and visited some of these people from the past. But again, instead of feeling sorry for myself, I did something about it. So, I mentioned that because I was president of my alumni association at my university in California. And then I come to Cincinnati, where I just was in a different situation where I didn't really know anyone. And then another example would be I worked at the Marriott headquarters. I did sales management, and then they asked me to do procurement. So I became the first woman to do that. And it was then 9/11 happened, and the hotel business really got hit hard, especially in the DC area. Reagan Airport was closed for 7 months. The Marriott Wardman Park, for example, only had 4 people staying there. General managers were now running 3 hotels. People I knew that had been managing a hotel for the company for 25 years were let go. So I decided to move into teaching at Cal Poly in the areas of international business and hospitality management because I was on the board. But I just want to let your listeners know this, and I think this is really important. I had a couple of things that happened when I was at Marriott headquarters. One was I was in a new startup division, which I feel very fortunate about. Again, all these people grew up in the company. I came in, I was creating a new division. And of course, if and I ended up getting people that had been there for 25 years. I knew an executive and I asked him, could he help me get a mentor? And he got me a mentor, and he had the head of HR meet with me for coffee. And I ended up getting a mentor who helped me understand the bigger part of the company because I was in a new division. I mentioned that again because I actually asked for help. There was another top executive. I went and met with him for coffee. He basically said to me, based on your skills, you should write 3 things you can do. I wrote those 3 things out. So the reason I mention that is when 9/11 happened, one of the three things I wrote was that I could go teach at a university. And so that was a natural thing. I thought, I always wanted to do this, but I never had the courage to go out and do it. And it was kind of a forcing event. So here I am, and I did it. So I just mentioned that because these are things and then how did I do that? How did I teach? I went in and they told me the classes they wanted me to teach. I ended up teaching 14 different courses, and I ended up sitting in on 2 professors' classes, and I saw how they taught this class, and then I decided how I would do it, and I created kind of a hybrid of what they did. But you're just kind of, and I took classes. I did the whole thing to learn how to teach. I learned, and I will just for your listeners, actually works for every job you're in. They teach you how people actually learn. There's audio, visual, and sensory. And it's like the kind of the kinesthetic learning. So what I did was I created teams. I had field trips. I got the students presenting. I did a lot of work with everybody kind of doing real high interaction so people would remember. And I think that I just really learned it's not just enough to know it yourself, but also to try to help others learn it. So that's another change for me to kind of go into that. And then here you also are, I wasn't tenured. I was like the junior person who was now on the faculty and having the tough schedule. Like they'd give me a class at 7:30 in the morning and at 6 at night. So, but I got to do it. So I was very happy.
Do you think that's so to kind of capture it on what you amputated was like the self, I would say, or maybe you said it, feeling sorry for myself. So I'm in a situation, I'm going to amputate being sorry for myself. We're just going to get the rubber where the rubber meets the road and figure it out, learn it so that we can have greater success.
I think that's true.
Yeah. When listening to all of what you were sharing here, one of the things I shifted from one hotel company to Marriott for the specific reason. I was interviewing a woman named Erica Alexander she's Global Chief Operations Officer for Marriott. She just retired. And she told me about something, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that." So I just actually switched. I went down to the baseline points, didn't have any points at all, so, and then built myself up because of what she had told me. And I find it fascinating that when we're talking about releasing and letting go of, there's so many these different paths that we do find these parallel skill sets for. And when we find them, we can write the three things down like you were challenged to do by a mentor of yours. How do you then look at sharing what you've learned as a leader now and the success that you have had with those that might be junior trying to come up and now they're into a new space? And this new space it requires them. Let me say it this way. When we go into a new space, we're no longer the expert. It's like you found yourself in a new space. You're no longer the expert. So you have to go out and you have to ask. How do you help people, or what would you offer as advice for those that find themselves in a new space, a new CEO or a new C-suite person, and it's the first 6 months? What do they do?
Well, that's a good question you're asking. When I got my MBA at Georgetown, they have you actually learn a lot of the Harvard cases for business. Mm-hmm. And there is a case that's a great example that you go out and you learn from the organization. So one of the things that I will say, and I'll give you a couple other industry examples, is that like when I became Assistant Secretary of State, I also met with previous Assistant Secretaries of State for 4 or 5 hours to get an idea from them and get input. I also knew what the organization was about, and I looked a lot of information about it. I also tried to do a lot of, I was very engaged and I wanted to learn it, just like I talked about the kinesthetic. I wanted to see it in action. You know, you were a sports envoy, so I wanted to meet sports envoys. I wanted to be in the field and see them. I wanted to exchange participants. I had Fulbright as an example, or cultural property. You know, when I signed the agreement for Amman, Jordan, for Jordan to have a cultural property agreement, I went out there and I got to see the different historic properties or things that they were protecting and understand better their cultural history. So what you're doing is you're really trying to get out there. But I'll give you an example. After I taught, I wanted to come back to Washington, and I had an opportunity to work for Lucent. And I worked in the telecom space for 12 years. I was an executive for Lucent and became Alcatel-Lucent and then became Nokia. So I remember when I first came into that job, I came in and the neighbor actually recruited me. He had been a colonel in the Marine Corps. And I had many interviews and I went in and I came to this giant trade show in Tennessee for 5,000 people. And there were all these people at the trade show and everybody knew each other. And I remember thinking, I had two things that popped in my mind. One, I'm in the first day of kindergarten. And two, I thought, I'm at a homecoming, but it's not my school. So then I thought, wow, did I make the right decision? Because here I am, know all these people in my industry, and now I've come into this new industry, telecom. So then I said, nope, I've decided to do this. I went on the evening hayride, but they had this event at the Gaylord, met a number of people. I went to every trade show booth. And then from a corporate standpoint, we had Bell Labs underneath as part of our research and development engine. So I would make appointments with all these scientists and engineers, and I would contact them and I would have them teach me all about these different things. I had a friend that also worked at Commerce. He actually would teach Spectrum. I learned, so I had to start from scratch and learn the basics of telecommunications. And I went out to all the experts. Now I did that at Procter & Gamble when I worked in research and development. I went out and probably met with 60 engineers. What I want to tell you is I did use my sales skills. I shared with them a folder and a vision. of what we were trying to do on environmental quality and the goals. And I asked them to teach me what they knew, and I asked them to support me on it. And then when I did, the State Department, I asked the team to help me create the goals for the organization. And we, as a bureau, we did it around the national security strategy. So I just want to say that everybody, but again, I spend a lot of time talking with people, trying to learn. I would just say to every person that's listening that you really should feel comfortable. And I've heard top CEOs that have come into organizations where they do very, very similar things. And going back to that case study basically said very similarly that this top executive went out and kind of walked around and talked to people and tried to understand the business. And then a lot of those leadership skills that you have, you basically can keep replicating them, and you'll see things that are similar from what
the walk and talk is really powerful. When you have the time and you do have the legacy that you can go back and talk to some of those individuals. Sometimes when the CEO was let go and then you come in as a new person, you can't really have those conversations because they're under a gag order where you can't talk. One of the things I've recently, I just had a conversation, recently with the client, Morgan Stanley. And so I was just up in New York, we on the trade floor ringing the bell, and conversation came up around in this space of inaction. So there was, in one part of their area, they were having some inaction where people know what to do, but they just don't push because they're either, it's fear. It's fear of the unknown, which I think if you just do the action, then you can get rid of the unknown. But they're in their headspace about how they're going to be seen. They're going to be looked at as different, or they're taking a risk, and that risk might, they're thinking it might impact their job or performance. How do you handle the inaction? Because there is a cost to inaction and not doing something. What would you offer to those who need to take a little bit more risk?
Well, I have two things that came in mind immediately when you mentioned this. I think it's very important for the leader or the manager to be receptive to people's input. So many times I've given input and I felt like I wasn't really listened to. And I really remember how it felt when you work on a project. And I can even think of one where I was a leader in my university where we worked for a year and we presented this, and I don't think they implemented one thing that we came up with. So those things are good lessons.
Yeah.
So what I did was, basically at this Department of State, there was something I wanted to do, which is reduce paper. And because in large bureaucratic organizations, there's lots of paper, I had to be also willing to not have as much paper, because, in other words, when you're briefed, you get paper. But anyway, 20 people said they would be part of this task force team, and they spent a lot of time on this, short-term, long-term, and medium-term. They did a lot of work. Anyway, I agreed to everything that they came up with, and they felt great. And then one of the first things that happened was I wanted some briefing, and they said, "But you've already said you're going to not have all this paper." But I said, "That's right, I did say that." So that's the thing. And another thing I remember is teaching. I remember when I went to Georgetown, they did the Socratic method. I don't know if people are familiar with this, but it's when the professor asks the students, and they go and ask everybody. They're like, they'll call, "Hey, John, tell me what your thoughts are. Mary, what do you think?" And it's very shocking if you've never had that happen. So then I went to teach, and I would ask the students, we went in one of those giant classrooms, I'd ask them and we have a conversation and I'd walk the room and I'd ask them. And I remember people being kind of shocked and afraid to answer. But what they saw quickly is I said to them, and I also had them help me. I had a librarian come and teach them better about proper research and having facts. Yes is fine. No is fine. Maybe is never fine. You got to kind of take your position and say, this is what I think. And if they say yes, and I agree with you, Professor Royce, and here's why, I'd say, thank you so much for that input. And somebody else would say, well, no, I don't agree. And here's why. And I'd say, this is great. Thank you so much for sharing this. And what the students saw immediately is that I was incredibly receptive to people presenting ideas and having kind of a thought process around it. I did that at the State Department too. There's a book that it's called The Wisdom of Crowds by Jim Sawicki of New York Times. And I got to meet him years ago. And basically what he said is that the crowd is always better than any group of experts. I don't know if you ever heard this.
Yeah.
And he throughout the book, every chapter is an example of that. So what I think is amazing is when I worked at Lucent, I had a problem I was trying to solve, and that was when I had gone to meet the author and read the book. And I asked somebody that worked at the company for years about a problem. She was a secretary, and she gave me her opinion. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is great. I never thought of that. So the only point I'm making is you don't want to be in such a bubble that you're too insular. You also have to be open to listen. And it's not easy to do it, but I think it's very important to, if you're going around asking people for advice, teach them how you want to receive the information, but also be receptive to evaluating it. I also had office hours at the university. I established office hours in the State Department for people to come and see me, and they could come up with, share their ideas with me. So I just think that trying to be receptive to ideas is, I think, a very important thing for a manager to do.
We have one of the things around the dinner table, well, previous dinner table, we had Thanksgiving dinner, and we had a lot of, my family was very entrenched in civil rights of 63, and then, 13, 14, 15th Amendments, when we first got rights to vote and things. One of the things I remember my uncle saying, and I was a little tight, so this is osmosis stuff, right? So I'm not there to have a conversation. But I do remember saying, they would always take the paper and argue both sides of a point.
Yeah.
And they would then switch, then somebody else would take the other person's viewpoint. And I found that it became, in my work, kind of getting this to osmosis, was that I was able or am able to see like both sides. And so then when you send me out to, I don't know, we saw Kazakhstan, for example. So I don't come in saying, here's what the United States is going to do for you.
Right.
I come in saying, what have we learned from you thus far?
Yeah.
Kazakhstan. What are you doing that we're doing? And it was interesting to see the people in the room that are like on my side, on the US side. I would ask them, what do we learn from Kazakhstan? And they would be quiet for like 15 seconds because they never even considered the question. I said, this is how diplomacy works, man. We have to make sure that we are walking a mile in the other person's shoes before we just come in and start on folks. And I think that's the reason Yerlan Suminov, love him. I just talked to him the other day, who had the vision for the Paralympic training center after seeing our center here in the United States and wanted to build his own. That whole thing came together with a lot of people with disabilities, that had inputs. And so we sent over another young woman who's a Paralympic athlete who is an architect. And so she designed a fire escape on the outside so that the people playing wheelchair or sitting volleyball, if a fire broke out, they can actually escape out the top without their artificial legs and try to go down the steps and into the place. So these things are, when you have people at the front of the table, it really does help to have a greater sense of success for all that are involved. How do you envision, I know you're not in the space right now, but you do have, tentacles in there in different locations. The future of like these cultural exchanges. Um, how do we show up in a nation in a world global state where we want to invite conversation? I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Well, I travel quite a bit in my job. I was an exchange participant myself, and I talked about that a little bit when I did my hearing. I personally went to Poland and Hungary in a delegation called the American Council of Young Political Leaders. I also was on their board and also on another exchange board. So I have always been very passionate about exchanges. And I think just going to different places to have those conversations, they're very impactful to me. For example, I went back to Hungary and I wanted to meet with people that I had met with before. I also had people at my house in Virginia that I also got to see again years later. The way those delegations go for that organization, it's all the political parties come. And in this case, when I went out, it was Republicans, independents, and Democrats going together. So I think it's interesting because what happened was, and there's this solidarity that happens when you go together, that all of a sudden you just feel like you're American. You forget the differences and you realize how much you have in common. And that's what we try to do with these exchanges. We try to bring people together once they travel. One was a good example was in the area of religious freedom and the religious ministerials. We brought for the first time ever on the International Visitor Leadership Program. We had Buddhists, rabbis, Catholic bishop, imams, you name it. They were traveling together across the United States, and they became respectful of each other's positions. Having many of them really had never really interacted over a period of weeks. They started in, I believe, New York and ended in Los Angeles. So I think that these programs are pretty much something that can be done for the future. I mean, we've done it for many years. I think it's just bringing people together, having them meet, obviously alumni, experts in the field, people, a lot of times that you can bring. I remember even one where we had women. I mean, there's so many. There's even on the women's ESPNW. I don't know if you know about that one. That's global sports mentoring. I mean, you love sports. That's another one. But one was on Fortune Women, where we just had these young women entrepreneurs from around the world. We get them mentored with top women at corporations. But I took myself and an ambassador and another assistant secretary, and we had a closed room just with a few people, and it was really great because I think the young women were very happy to hear we're very much like they are. Everybody's got the same things. It's like you're managing your family, your kids, your parents, you're trying to figure out time for yourself. I mean, it's a lot of the similar things no matter what field you're in. You've got the same things that you're trying to manage. And I think people forget that a leader has a lot of those same attributes or issues that everyone has. And I think, so what I'm saying is this dialogue that you have on the ground, you know, it's either here in the United States or out in the field. I think that it's, you know, and I would also add this, how powerful it is to be an American, but it's also, I'm going to tell you that everyone here on the watching, that you have to realize how much power you have as a person, that you can say something to a person that they could remember for the rest of their life. And you have to remember that you have that power. So you have to realize that words matter, showing up matters, being supportive or committing and following through matters, being in your seat matters. You will be remembered, and you will remember who's been there for you.
Right.
You know, I just had a mentor pass away, and she always believed in me. And I just wanted to say to people, like, think about what you can do for other people too. I know we talked a little bit, you know, instead of saying, oh, I don't have anyone, you got to think, well, what can I do for others? Because you could be a protege or a mentor. And I think that's the best way to go about it. Just be thinking, what can I do? I did have a young lady that used to work for me. She was an intern, recently reached out to me and tell me she was paying it forward. And how I mentored her, and she was now helping a young girl who was in the city, who you know, and I just thought that that's really powerful.
Yeah. I'm looking up as you're talking for GSMP, so the Global Sport Mentoring Program, and for the women, Sarah Hillier, Dr. Sarah Hillier, who runs that amazing program, and I got a chance to be part of that as well on the disability side, and have folks come in on those exchanges and learn tremendous amount from them, and the situation that they're in, and how we, you know, support. And how we can be mentors and be mentored. And so, yeah, my mentor, you probably know her as well. She passed away 2 years ago, Judith Human, in the space. So anytime I went out on a State Department visit, I was calling her up. Hey, what's the lay of the land here? What I need to do? And it's really great to have those individuals. And so seeking them out, I think, is the most important part. And not saying that you have, even with AI now, you can go back and you can have a mentor who might not be alive and just start asking questions of that. What should I do in this situation? And have them come back to you and share. Maybe it is somebody that you want to have a conversation with that's no longer here physically, but their words are still there, and then we have their essence of their tone and tonality with that as well. Marie Royce, this is the amazing conversation. I could talk to you forever. And I know you got to go to a mayor's deal this evening. What have I not covered that you would like to share?
Well, I would, well, thank you so much. You know, one of the things I think people do sometimes is they put things in their mind. And I guess you could call it the reset button. You know, I think what you want to do is take today as something that you can control, and the past is the past, and the future is the future. But today you have the power to do things, and I think you have to realize how powerful you can be in a day, and a lot of it's your mind. For example, I did tell the students this at Cal Poly when I was teaching, that when I first came to Marriott, you know, I remember feeling sorry for myself because I was one of the few female executives, and the men would come by my office, and they'd be on their way to the cafeteria, and I never was invited. So one day I said, so where are you guys headed? They said, well, we're going to the cafeteria. I go, can I go? Come along? And they go, yeah, sure. So so the only reason I say that, and then I was on this board at the university, and I was the first woman on the board, and this other woman shows up, and I had been, you know, nominated and voted on by this top male executive. And I said to her, I said, wow, there's another woman on the board. Who nominated you? She said, I nominated myself. She said, I nominated myself. I called the university. She said, I'm qualified and you need me. I can contribute and I'm nominating myself. So she became the second female board member. And again, I want to share with people, you can't feel bad for yourself just waiting. It goes back to saying, well, they'll recognize my good work. So what I want to tell you something is that you need to put your own personal mission statement together. And you have to say, this is who I am, this is what I believe in. And I am going to be my own creative force. I'm going to go out and ask for things. This is what I'd like to do. And I think that that's what you have to do. Instead of saying, oh, I'm not. And it's also another one I gave. I was at Georgetown, giving the MBAs a talk. And it was called the Women Making Waves Conference. And I asked if anyone had ever gone surfing. And I had, because, I'm from California. And I used to count the waves. And you count the waves, and there's usually in a cycle of 10, when's the largest wave? And I asked, okay, almost everybody raised their hand. And I said, well, which wave is probably the biggest wave that you could have? And I'm trying to describe kind of the cycle, right? And this woman screams up and jumps up, this MBA. She said, it's the wave you catch. Isn't that great? It's the wave you catch. It's the best way.
It's the best
way. And I go, wow, you're right. It's the wave you catch.
Yeah.
So I just say that because you know what? You're not going to catch every wave. But that's like baseball. I mean, all these sports where you say, I love sports, they're great analogies, because, you're going to not get everything, but you get some, and that's good.
Right. In baseball, if you're batting 300, you're an all-star.
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So I just want everybody to realize that you just keep trying. You might even see something that you want, and that's one other piece is you could have less others to support you. Like if someone says to you, oh, you're fantastic. If you work for a company, you could say, would you be willing to put that in writing and send it to my boss? Or you could say, I saw this really neat thing I'd like to try. I had a guy just last week say he'd like to be on an exchange program, asked if I would nominate him. So he never said like, oh gosh, I'm sitting here waiting. He said to me, would I be willing? And I said, you were so qualified. Yes. So I think people should kind of think, well, I really want this.
Absolutely. I mean, I just did that for you to you the other a few months ago for Paris. And
yes, you're great. Well, good example of that. You're great. I mean, I'm very proud of you for doing that.
It's just I mean, I want to be reciprocal in everything. I'm so grateful for the opportunities. This has been wonderful. I have another example I want to share, but I'm not going to do it because I know you have to go. I'll do it in the show notes for us. But we have been talking with the incredible Marie Royce, and this conversation has been wonderful. Your journey, your leadership, and your impact on the global stage are just inspiring. And I know that our listeners are walking away with powerful insights today. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and for all the work that you continue to do to elevate others. Wow, what a conversation. Marie Royce reminds us that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about staying curious, staying humble, and staying connected. We heard how she amputated comfort zones to thrive in new industries, created community when she felt isolated, and used diplomacy to build real, lasting change globally and locally. So that's the kind of mindset that elevates success. And listen, I'm not done yet. This Saturday, I'm diving deeper into 3 of Marie's most powerful insights, breaking them down and showing you how to apply them in your own leadership journey. So if you haven't already, head on over to Elevate Life on beehive.com and make sure you're signed up. That's where the bonus content drops. You don't want to miss it. And of course, if today's episode sparks something in you, subscribe to the show, like the episode, give it that bling, thumbs up, and then share it with someone who really needs to rise, because you never know, your share could be someone else's spark. This is Amputate to Elevate Success podcast. Until next time, keep rising, keep leading, and keep listening. Go forth, inspire your world. Bye for now.